Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I told you last weekend I was going to get something cobbled together on that engine so that I could bring the block and the heads up to an operating temperature and retorque the head studs as per the instructions in the copper head gaskets. I did in fact get something set up on the engine, and it's out there. It's been plugged in for about 5 hours now. The front of the engine is about 150 degrees and the back of the engine is about 125. After 5 hours, obviously, it's a bit of a slow cooker. Before I take more drastic steps, I'm going to give it a couple of more hours and see if the temperature increases at all, or if that's the best I'm going to get out of it. Before I go out there and show you that setup, I was just going to point out that I've started moving stuff around on this side of the shop. I've got the fab table moved out from in front of the big bay door over here to the side, and it's kind of taking up part of the lift bay here. But that opens up this whole side so I can kind of dogleg the truck into this side of the shop. Underneath the I-beam, which has that winch on it. I'm going to need this whole setup in this part of the shop to lift the engine out of the truck and set the new engine in. That's just kind of the way I've got my setup here, and it works pretty good. I just got to do some finagling around to make it all, get it all to come together. The next step for me now is actually to run down to my dad's house and steal his forklift if he's not using it right now, and get up here and get the truck shuffled over into this side of the shop from the storage end of the building. So me and the dog are going to jump in the pickup, run down the street, and see about stealing a forklift. And there you go. There's nothing to it. When you have a forklift on one end and remote control rear steer, makes it pretty easy to get it in the shop, even though I had to have it offset so far to one side. So now that that's in here and ready to be taken apart, let's go in and check on that engine and see how the temperature is coming up on it. All right, now what I got going on in here, I've just taken a canister style engine heater, block heater, and I've got it plumbed up to where it tees into two hoses to feed each side of the engine. Obviously, it will circulate through the engine as normal, up through the intake manifold, up to this point to where I could bleed the air and fill the system. And it just sits there and does a constant circulation, you know, just basically thermodynamics, I guess you would refer to it as. And it's been on there all day long. And we're at about 150 degrees at the hottest point, as far as I can tell. I don't know if you can see that on there. Let me see if I can get it to focus. No, not so much. There we go. Yeah, about 151 maybe. You go back here to the back of the block and it's about 123, we'll say 125. I'll bet I could find somewhere in there that's close enough to that. Anyway, that's not going to cut it. Fortunately, I've already started working on plan B. So I've got over here is an old turkey cooker, deep fryer setup, and a stainless steel bucket. So I've got a fitting welded in there and a couple of pieces of pipe laying around here somewhere. I'm going to slap something together and just boil some water and circulate it through there. I really don't see why that shouldn't just take a few minutes to get that thing up to about 200 degrees if I want. So that's what I'm going to work on. Hopefully I can get it done tonight. All right, well, I've got the new apparatus up and running. I'm going to take you out there and show you. It's really noisy, so there won't be any commentary, but you'll figure it out once you see what's going on. Good thing I'm doing this in the winter because it is flat toasty in that room right now. Well, I got it up to 180. Actually 180 at the back cylinders, about 185 up front. So I went ahead and put the fire out because I'm pretty sure that's about all I'm going to get out of my combination. So right now I've got the pump out there running, just circulating that water through the block and the bucket, kind of bringing everything down to a nice steady temperature at a nice even pace. And I guess we're going to call that good. Retorque head studs and set up valve train tomorrow.
Six and a half hours later.
I think that pretty well sums up the engine, or at least the long block for the most part. I do have a couple small details to take care of yet. I've got to figure out these spacers for the crank support, which that's a matter of about an hour from start to finish as far as gathering up material. I'm sure I've got the stuff here to build those. Throw them in the lathe, build 4 of them matching exactly the same. As I'd mentioned in the previous videos, the extensions or those stanchions that come with that crank support are actually about 1.5 inches too long. I also need to build about 3 spacers that go between this head and the front motor plate. Again, that will all take place when I build those, all in the same process. I have to build a small bushing that goes in the back of the crankshaft. This industrial crankshaft is meant for a big pilot bearing for a manual transmission and a clutch. So I have to build a bushing that fits my torque converter in that. Should be pretty simple. And finish up the distributor details. I'll go into that here in just a minute. Everything else on the engine that needs to go on this engine is on the truck already. I believe I'm going to use the valve covers that are on the truck just because it's already set up with my evac tubes and oil fill. All of that is already on those. I have plans for these valve covers here. I just don't want to get in a hurry building all of the stuff for those. And then the injection. That will be the last thing. Actually, the first thing to come off the truck, but the last thing to go on this engine. So I run a Enderley bird catcher, mechanical fuel injection. I have all of the stuff to put a tune in it for this engine here. And as far as putting a tune in it, I don't mean, anything like electronic fuel injection EFI, where you are downloading a tune. This is just changing the jets that are in the hat and the main pill, and you let it rip and tune from there. Another thing that I'm going to have to do is figure out headers. So the heads that are on the engine in the truck have a big block Chevy bolt pattern. So those headers were built, basically they would bolt on a big block Chevy head or a Blue Thunder head. These heads here are a standard Cobra Jet exhaust port and a standard Ford 460 bolt pattern. So I'm going to have to either A, build new headers, or B, build adapters that I can bolt to these heads and bolt my headers onto them. The headers are on the truck now, I really like. So I'm going to look into building some adapters, and that will probably be more CNC router table work. So I'll be looking into that next week for sure. And the last thing is the distributor. So we'll go in here and look at that. I was going to use this distributor that I took out of the 547 that's in the truck. This started life as an MSD Pro billet distributor. You can see right there. And actually, out here on the shelf, this is the stem that came off of that distributor. So I took all the guts out of the distributor and removed the stem. It simply bolts into this billet housing. Removed that, figured out the length of stem that I needed, and built this piece right here, and then stole the bearings and all the stuff out of, all the parts I needed out of this stem, put them in this one, and then shorten the shaft accordingly. Now from the factory, this distributor here actually starts out life just like this one. You can see it's a small cap distributor, and I bought what MSD calls a cap adapt. So this cap adapt is this plastic piece right here, simply bolts onto the body, and then you can use a Ford style distributor cap. So that's super convenient because these are pretty cheap and you can get them anywhere. Now, so like I said, the plan was to use this distributor out of the 547 in the new engine, and then take this here. This is actually a Summit knockoff of the same distributor. I just picked this up. It was on the discount rack at our local Summit. And my plan was to just duplicate and make this distributor the same as this distributor. Then I could have 2 of them for the small engines. The engines would be completely loaded, and I wouldn't have to swap the distributor from the truck to the new engine when I changed engines. Then I happened across this one. So this is an offset drive. This thing was actually set up for a crank trigger, so it had no electric guts in it. You would have your crank trigger down by your timing pointer, reading off of a wheel on the front of the crankshaft. And this, it just distributes spark, and the actual crank trigger on the front of the crankshaft is signaling the box when to fire that spark. So my plan was use this distributor in the engine I'm putting together right now. This one will be small engine number 2, and then I will put the guts in this thing to make it an actual functioning distributor and use it in the 547. Then I realized that the intake manifold that is on that engine right there does not fit a big cap distributor. No big deal, I can just go back to the small cap and it will fit, no problem. After a little bit of thinking, it's kind of silly. This setup right here fits perfect, works perfect in the 547. There's no point in changing from that. Leave it alone. So this one went back together as it is. It's going to go back in the 547 when I put that engine back together. I went ahead and figured out a way to get a magnetic pickup in this deal. I've got that all set up. Basically, I just have to machine a slot through this billet aluminum housing right here to get the wiring through. And this will be used in the 2 smaller engines. I guess this is just a spare. I may go ahead and shorten this stem and set it up so if something happens to either one of these, you can throw that in real quick and it's good to go. The only downside to this setup that I've found so far is it uses a Mallory style cap adapter and cap. And this is stuff that is used like on magnetos, like the Mallory magnetos, and they are ridiculously expensive for what they are. This cap right here, to buy it from anybody that actually has one, is right around $100, $95 to $105 everywhere I've seen so far. I think this rotor is right around 60 to 70 bucks for a rotor, and that's if you can find anyone that has one. Summit shows that they're not in stock, but if you start looking at places that do big mechanical injection and magneto stuff, they show them in stock. So it must be a supply and demand thing for who has them and, you know, the price that they charge for them. Fortunately, this offset distributor came with the one on it, came with the adapter and the cap and the rotor. It was already on there. And I had this set up from a different distributor, a different Mallory distributor that I had modified and changed around for the buggy years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and run this setup in this distributor and see just how long it lives. I mean, if I got to buy a $100 cap once a year, I guess that's not that big a deal. The rotor itself, as long as it doesn't get damaged, I can build a new contact for the tip. That's no big deal. And I have a spare if something did happen to the plastic part. So I might try to run that as long as I can. If that MSD10 box that is in the truck starts eating through this thing, I know it puts out a lot of power, makes a lot of spark. If it starts tearing these caps and rotors up just too fast, then I guess I will end up building my own adapter that will go on this offset drive and use a regular Ford big cap distributor. So that's the plan there, and I think that should take care of the distributor situation. And a little fun fact for anybody that's curious, this is a Ford Duraspark distributor used through the mid 70s to mid 80s probably. And as you can see, with a little bit of work and a little tinkering around, those actually make really nice distributors, and they're fairly short. This is probably the shortest distributor that you can get if you're trying to fit, you know, a complete distributor under a blower. There's one other combination that is a little bit shorter, that is a complete distributor, not just, you know, not just a spark director, but the point style distributor is actually even a little shorter yet, and you can take the electronic parts and fit them in that body as well. Might not be as blingy, but they're a really good distributor. Just got to put a little effort into them. Another little nugget, this is actually a 351 Windsor distributor. You can tell by the size of the gear, and all you have to do to fit a 351 Windsor distributor in a 460 is change that gear right there. And then double check, because I know some of the distributors especially the factory TFI module distributors, this tip sticks out a little bit farther on a 351 Windsor distributor. So that might interfere with your oil pump drive rod. So just keep an eye on that if you decide to try that trick. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. That way next week I can jump right into tearing this truck apart, getting these two engines swapped around. I'm not sure how fast that process will go. I know I'm swapping a big block Ford with a big block Ford, but I am certain that I will run into something that's a little different. I'm going to have to sort out alternator mounting, maybe a couple of little things like that, but hopefully it will go smooth. Hopefully maybe by the end of next week we'll be doing a first fire up on the new engine. That would really be pretty cool. Love to drive this thing out of the shop again. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one. I told you last weekend that I was going to kind of cobble something together on that engine so that I could get it,